Hello, this is Jeff with the INTJ equation, and today I am joined by Nate, who is an INFP with borderline personality disorder. Like I mentioned before, I have avoidant personality disorder. Borderline personality disorder is kind of opposite in a lot of ways and similar in a lot of ways. It's just usually brought on by trauma, especially early childhood trauma, and it's very debilitating. And accentuating in different ways. And AvPD is Nate. Would you like to tell the people a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm currently 24. I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder at the age of 20, 22. Yeah, 22. I've been in therapy for it for a bit over a year. I graduated, as they call it, from the DBT program. It's the therapy that they try to give people with borderline personality disorder. It's something that, even though I was diagnosed 2 years ago, I've kind of been dealing with my whole life, through just a lot of different things that have happened. Yeah, I'm an INFP, and I'm a student in psychology. So this is kind of the stuff I just love to talk about.
All right, very cool. I appreciate you getting on and speaking so openly about it. I know it's probably not the easiest thing to do, especially for a kind of a choir shire tape like a type like an INFP.
Mhm.
But before we get into the meat of it, I would like to remind everybody to like, share, subscribe if you like this content. Leave a comment below. Add me on social media, INTJ equation all around, and send me an email if you'd like at intjequation.com at gmail.com. And also have a Discord server. All that information will be down below in the server. All right. So we'll just start off saying that you went through like the dialectic behavior therapy, the DBT, something
Yep.
I've experimented with a little bit. I've never done much one-on-one. I did a
Okay.
group thing one time, but it seemed like the extroverts were just kind of dominating the whole
Right.
thing. It was
I
kind of
agree.
hard to get a word in.
Yeah, definitely.
So what's your experiences of being an INFP and all that? And when did you figure this out?
I mean, I took the 16 personalities multiple times, and was given results like ENFP to INFP. So I wasn't entirely sure, but I looked at, the different functions and kind of just decided for myself. I tend to think I'm an INFP, because I'm very extroverted on the intuition side. Those are very easy conversations for me. Emotionally, I am very sensitive, but I tend to internalize emotions more, and not really speak as much about them as I would say my like extroverted intuition.
Okay. And that's something I don't really associate too much with personality disorder. How do you think like an INFP and having BPD, the borderline personality disorder, kind of correlates?
It's interesting, because on one end, I think, I think you could have any personality type, and still have this personality disorder, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was some correlation, at least, with maybe with like certain types have a higher rate of this disorder. But I also think that the way that this disorder like manifests has a lot to do with the personality type. So with INFP, I know there are some borderlines. I know that it's very visible that they have it. At least with me as an INFP, I internalize my emotions a lot. So it tends on the surface to not really seem as though I might have the disorder. But then I bottle things up to the point where I will have episodes and the disorder is full blown.
What does BPD look like for you? It's like autism. It's like a lot of other mental health disorders. It's not a cookie cutter thing, and everybody's a little
Right.
bit different. How does it manifest for you?
Um, I would say that I tend to bottle my emotions up a lot.
Hmm.
I feel things very strongly. Internally, I will catastrophize things very easily, So I'm trying to think of an example. Like let's say I get a bad grade on a test, or something. My mind will start going to, okay, you're going to flunk out, you're going to fail, you're going to become homeless. And then I'll like think of like killing myself or something. So it just, it really snowballs really quickly. but I do internalize things a lot. So on the surface with other people, they can tell something's wrong because I'll get very silent, but I won't like really, I guess, communicate it very much.
Okay, like a lot of people, I don't know if you read about what they call quiet borderline personality
Hmm.
disorder. It's not like an official diagnosis in the DSM-5 or anything like
Right.
that. So you don't externalize it on other people, like that, yell at them, throw things at them, and kind of reckless things like they do like that.
So I will explode from time to time. I would say I generally internalize things up until the point where, the bottle's just too full and the cap pops off. And that's when I'll have my episodes. Generally that's triggered by I guess, the things that are kind of correlated with BPD. So feelings of abandonment, or rejection. But it's interesting, and I've been trying to figure out why this is. I know a lot of people with borderline. I've dated someone with borderline. They will, when they lash out, it's attacking, the other person. And when I lash out, I almost never attack the other person. I start attacking myself.
Hmm.
Which I know, like, there's no like greater one there. I think it's also really uncomfortable for people to observe that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wonder why that is. I wonder if it has to do with my personality type. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, I think most people, the types that I've seen just in my life, it seems like extroverted types are more prone to it, especially like ESFPs. I've seen
Okay.
ENTJ with borderline personality
Hmm.
disorder, ESTP. My ex-wife was an ESTP. She seemed to have it. My mom and stepdad are ESFPs. They both had it.
Okay.
Um, how do you think it came for you? Was it something that happened in your childhood? Was it like a ongoing series of trauma or abuse or neglect?
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of that. There's also a belief that it's somewhat genetic, which I do believe. There's studies actually now that like if you experience trauma, it can actually change like your active genes, which is like epigenetics. And my dad experienced a lot of trauma, and I honestly do think I was born with some of the genes or personality traits that may correlate with it, and it could just be emotional sensitivity. I think when people are born, they're already a little bit different. I don't think you're a blank slate when you're born.
Hmm.
So I do think some of it was genetic, because I remember even from a very, very, very early age, I was extremely reactive. Like I think I threatened suicide when I was like 4 or 5 years old. And that was at such a young age. But
Yeah.
I did also experience a lot of trauma with my dad, who, he's undiagnosed, but he has a lot of borderline and narcissistic traits. So I think a lot of that also probably um, shifted me into sort of developing this disorder.
Yeah, it's quite unfortunate. It's just very cyclical, like it
Yeah.
just like, your dad had the abuse and he abused you. And,
Right.
hopefully, anybody watching this or anybody just coming to this own realization, like you don't have to do this to your kids or other
Yeah,
people, you
exactly.
can stop the cycle.
Agree. Totally agree.
I think that's pretty important there.
Hmm.
All right. So it came from the childhood. So you said you were pretty reactive as a kid. I know during that age, I don't know what kind of psychology you're studying or anything, but like developmental psychology, like kids, especially like birth to 5, they really don't know how to regulate their own emotions and they look
Hmm.
to it to their adults. So I imagine
Yeah.
having like a dad that was showed those traits and was abusive, you kind of mimic that and didn't really
Yeah.
learn that.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's an interesting take, because children eventually learn to regulate their emotions, be probably mostly through their parents, and kind of having that be the role model, doesn't help much.
So would you say like the DBT therapy and I don't know if you're going through like CBT therapy as well, the cognitive behavioral therapy, has that been helpful?
Yeah, I did do cognitive before I was diagnosed, and I found that it wasn't helping very much. I do find DBT to be pretty helpful, but for anybody that has this disorder, I would say you have to be patient with your progress, and understanding that you won't wake up one day cured. Just like anybody else on this planet, I don't think anybody reaches just a sense of total peace and happiness for the rest of their life, unless they're, you know, maybe the Dalai Lama does. But like, you know, life is life, and there's always going to be challenges. And having a personality disorder is just something that you have to fight every single day and struggle with. And you need to recognize like you can make progress, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be cured or completely gone.
Yeah, it's a lifelong battle.
Mhm.
I'm 37 and I've really just started taking the steps to really tackle this avoidant personality disorder. It's been a really long, lonely life. I started really showing the traits about like 10 or 11. It just hit me like a ton of bricks one day, and like I just shut down. I didn't know what was going on. And but yeah, it's just you got to take it day by day. And like you
Yeah.
said, just don't beat yourself up if you're not perfect when you wake up the next day. It's very linear. It goes up and down, up
Yeah.
and down. You
Yeah,
have your peaks and
exactly.
valleys.
Like watching a stock. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. What ways do you think you've improved?
Definitely just in distress tolerance a lot. Sort of how I manage when those really raw, strong emotions come up. I've definitely still had my setbacks that even like recently, you know, have broken some what's the word? You know, just periods of time, I guess I've gone without doing certain unhealthy things and recently broke those. But at the same time, I look back at it and I go, well, I had, you know, like a year-long streak of not doing this. So that is improvement, even though I guess you call it relapsed. But at the end of the day, you know, those are things I used to be doing every day. And I went a whole year and then ended up doing it like once or twice, as opposed to, you know, where I was at before. So I think it helps. As I said, I don't think it takes the disorder away, but I think it really like helps manage it a lot.
And cut me off if you're getting uncomfortable or anything. I
Yeah.
can always edit it out. Are you referring to like any kind of like drugs or alcohol there?
Mostly like self-harm, is something I
Oh,
struggle with, but it had been a year since I had done it and I had an episode and did it again. And then yeah, alcohol, I had sobriety from for over 100 days and ended up getting back into drinking for a bit.
that's good. Just don't get discouraged. Like you said, you're gonna
Yeah.
fall, and you just got to pick yourself back up. I know a lot of people. They really struggle with self harm. I used to do like
Mhm.
behavioral health with kids, and I had this teenage boy and his grandma adopted him. She just didn't understand it, and like one he did really well and he just cut himself one day and she was like flipping out on him, like, like I explained the same thing to her, like I just said here, it's very linear. It's up and
Right.
down. You have your peaks and
Right.
valleys, you have your good days, your bad days. What is it like? Or do you cut or do you burn? What's your method usually?
It's cutting.
Cutting.
Yeah.
What does that do? Does that like relieve you or
It's a bit of the relief, because I know when you know when you experience pain, the brain releases endorphins, so you get a little bit of a high from it. But there's also just this sort of like when I'm doing it, it's usually when I'm having a lot of self-hate and shame.
Mhm.
So it's almost like I'm punishing myself for everything I'm feeling, but I'm doing it in a visible way, I guess, so it makes it feel more real. Just because a lot of BPD is this sense of invalidation, and I guess doing that is sort of validating my emotions physically in a sense.
Yeah, I'm sure you didn't get that as a kid, like your emotional needs weren't met when you were a kid, right? And you just kind of
Yeah.
learn to shut it down and it just builds and builds and builds and you just got to let it out somehow.
Hmm.
I know the one kid I was talking about, I definitely can't mention any names or anything. He said it
Yeah.
kind of relieved him from suicidal thoughts and tendencies. So
Yeah.
that's,
It can
yeah.
do that, I would say. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'm just looking at some of the criteria for the diagnoses. So
Hmm.
chronic feelings of emptiness. I think that's just something that a lot of INFPs can feel anyways, right?
Yeah. It might be correlated to that personality type. I haven't explored that too much. I'm not 100% sure. Um, but no, that is something I do notice I struggle with personally. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's emotional instability, reaction to day-to-day events. So you said they learn to kind of cope with stress and everything like that. And then you're getting improving on that. That's good. And that's kind of like the cutting was. That was just a very poor coping skill
Right.
to deal with all that. frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. Do you ever have anything like that? Like, I don't know if you're in like a relationship or anything like that, where kind of draw these scenarios. I know you said you catastrophize.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a huge issue for me. And I don't know how prevalent this is among other people with borderline, but I know with myself, I I do create, imagined abandonment when it's not even happening. And it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy, because when that happens, I will actually like start to abandon the other person, because in my head I'm like, no, like if I don't get abandoned, if I'm the one who does it, like it won't hurt as much.
Yeah, yeah. I notice a big thing with INFPs. They kind of like ghost people.
Yeah, I do a bit of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just trying to like get kind of behind the psychology of that, and they kind of say they just get overwhelmed and they just
Hmm.
ghost everybody, really, not just a single person.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of loneliness associated with INFP. And I notice myself sometimes I actually feel most lonely when I'm not alone, just because I'll try to be around people and I feel isolated, like I can't connect with them. So just allowing myself to be alone is sort of more so I can imagine there's people out there, right, that I would connect with, as opposed to like facing it and then feeling very out of place when I try to be around other people.
Okay. So it was like a big thing with like self-identity too, with a borderline personality
Yeah.
disorder. And do you kind of feel like you have your own identity, or do you feel like you don't know yourself, or you're like different from day to day?
It's rough because, I feel, and I wonder if this is also somewhat related to being an INFP, but I feel like I can logically understand why someone is the way they are, no matter who they are, no matter how mean they are, how much full of hate they might be. Um, and like I find myself a lot of the times trying to defend, uh people that are really like viewed negatively.
Hmm.
Um, and that's just an example, but that might be part of the unstable identity, because I sometimes I don't even know my own beliefs, because I feel like I can support and argue any belief, you know, just because like I'm trying so hard to understand. So almost like I guess I'm viewing the world through the lens of like a child that hasn't figured out, their moral standing and their beliefs and all that. Because I'm viewing everything like I'm trying to view I view a lot of things without judgment, which I think creates that.
Yeah, that's one really thing I love about INFPs. They're one of my favorite types, really. I haven't met too many males. I met a few males in in person, but they're really about like the disadvantage and kind of protecting them and speaking up for people that really can't speak up for themselves.
Mhm.
So you said that you were in a relationship with somebody else with a BPD. How was that?
So they were diagnosed, but they didn't accept the diagnosis. I believe they may have also had some narcissistic traits that were kind of preventing them from having that self-awareness.
Hmm.
Um, admittedly, like I did do certain things that I regret. Just trying to like be able to be healthier in relationships. And I was pretty disappointed in my own actions to a certain extent, but at the same time, there was just because there was no awareness from their end. It was every argument, everything was always my fault. Um, Even with sorts of things. So this is like what I don't. And I got a response from somebody else that was on the BPD subreddit, and they said this isn't borderline, this is something else, because there were certain things they would do, I guess, where they would be quiet maybe for 10 minutes, or we would be together and they'd say, hey, I'm gonna go into the other room, I just feel like being on my phone right now. And I'd say, okay. And then 5 minutes go by and they come bursting back into the room and they say like, hey, like you should be able to realize like I'm not doing well, like that's what that means. And they would flip out on me. And like, you know I'm trying to like, I really want to have a relationship where there's just like this transparent communication, where someone, if they feel that way, they can tell me. If I feel a certain way, I can tell them before either of us is trying to do things to get the other person to react a certain way. um So there was a decent amount of that, them trying to do something and then getting upset with me if they didn't get the reaction they wanted out of me.
Yeah, that's very common to the experiences I have. I think I read a lot of like books on masculinity and femininity, dating and pickup artistry and things like that. And they say
Mhm.
that this, very generally speaking, this is not towards all women and all types of women,
Yeah.
but they are usually very indirect with their what they
Mhm.
want. They'll test you to kind of see if you can pass the test, basically, like saying,
Yeah.
I need some alone time. It's like a cry for help, saying I need someone to talk to. And instead of
Yeah.
just telling you I need someone to talk to, it's just kind of their way of doing it. So somebody with a BPD might just do that and kind of knock it out of the park, basically, and go
Right.
overboard.
It's the emotions are hyperactive.
What type do you think this person was?
So they took the Myers-Briggs, and I believe they were an ENFJ. That's what they were.
ENFJ, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any contact with that person anymore, or
No, not anymore.
no?
Mm-mm.
Okay. I'm just moving down the criteria again. Impulsive behavior in at least two areas of potentially self-damaging: spending, sex, substance abuse, reckless driving. So you said you did the cutting and the alcohol. Inappropriate, intense anger or difficulty controlling anger. You definitely talked about like regulating your emotions and not letting stress get the best of you, right?
Right.
Pattern of unstable and intense interpersonal relationships. We just talked about that a little bit. Do you have any contact with your father still, or
Yeah, I do talk to him from time to time,
yeah?
but it's kind of, I would say I've set up boundaries and I stick to them pretty well.
It's good. Yeah, I think
Um,
that's one thing that therapy really teaches you too. And if anybody's watching this and they're having problems with anything in life, there's no shame of getting a therapist,
Absolutely.
even if just some temporary problems. Have you been put on any medication or anything?
Yeah. They messed around for a while trying to find the right cocktail, but what I'm on now, I've been on for almost a year and it works pretty well.
What medicine is that, if you don't mind sharing?
I'm on Lexapro, Lamictal, which is a mood stabilizer, but they're starting to give it to people with borderline, I know.
Mhm.
Vyvanse, which is, an upper, it's for ADD.
Yeah,
And then gabapentin.
I'm not familiar too much with the last one. Does it seem to be helping?
Yeah, gabapentin is basically the psychiatrist called it duct tape. They prescribe it for almost anything. I take it mainly for anxiety, but yeah, I find it helps.
That's good. Okay. So we're talking about like stress related paranoid ideation and dissociative symptoms. Do you ever like disassociate with anything? Like you just don't feel like you're in your body or yourself?
Yeah, so that happens to me only when it's complete crisis mode and things get really bad.
How often do you go in crisis mode, would you say?
Probably a couple of times a year it will happen.
The year? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one big problem about it, like you said, like your dad showed narcissistic tendencies and BPD tendencies. It's the
Mhm.
comorbidity of it. I think that's just really
Right.
helpful with clinical psychology uh, in general. And I think typology is kind of the key to that, because they just diagnose you with one thing, but it might be totally something different. Like I was talking to
Right.
some people on my Discord server and they said like they have ADHD, and I was just kind of explaining that PTSD and ADHD, they have very similar symptoms and
Mhm.
it's often misdiagnosed. And so, some people got offended. I may have been insensitive. I am an INTJ, and it's kind of what we do. Not that I
My
that I
sister's an
mean to do it.
INTJ, so I understand. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I actually I think that the DSM's due for a pretty big revamping because I'm not very big on like classifying disorders. I believe in more of like a dimensional analysis, sort of like, oh, you might have this percent of these traits and this of percent of these traits. Because I don't think it's just like cancer, right? Like it's not like, oh, you have 70% cancer and 30%, like some other, like physical disorder.
Mhm.
Mental health is much more complex and trying to classify everything. I think it's more dimensional for sure.
I think the biggest reason they do it is for billing, because I
Yeah, it
work as a
is.
case manager for behavioral healing. Like, oh, they don't have a
Mhm.
diagnosis, so we can't bill them. Like, I
Right.
I haven't even finished my bachelor's degree, and it's supposed to be like master level, and PhDs are supposed to be diagnosing people. I was asked to diagnose people of what I thought that was like.
Really.
I don't know if I'm that comfortable with this, but
Yeah.
ended up just being ADHD. You're going in the ADHD section, just a
Mhm.
matter. Can you sit down and like South Park? I don't know if you ever watched that episode where they read like the Great Gatsby or something, and the kids that couldn't pay attention and fell asleep, they labeled them ADHD.
I don't know if I remember that one. At South Park actually is on in the background right now.
Oh
It's
wow.
funny you mentioned that. Yeah.
All right. So you said you noticed like suicidal threats and stuff about four or five.
Mhm.
I think like there's a comorbidity and I've had tendencies like this too, and it was just automatically dismissed when I would say something like that.
Yeah.
Is that a similar uh
So yeah, so I think the reason it unfortunately became something I would start doing more and more, right? Because it happened the first time when I was that age, but um, you know, I loved my mom. Like she tried her best as a parent. I'm not trying to blame her, but just analyzing everything that happened, she was with my dad, who I think was very narcissistic. So she would always, just validate him, feel like she was walking on eggshells. And she ended up doing the same to me. So when I would do those unhealthy things, she would, react and give me what I wanted. And
mm,
that sense of validation, I think it taught me at a very young age, like in order to get what I want, I have to be extreme. I have to do this, right? So unfortunately, I think it kind of reinforced that behavior.
yeah, yeah. What type do you think she was?
She was an ENFP.
ENFP.
Yeah,
Okay. So yeah, someone that kind of does accommodate to other people in a lot of ways, and right,
yeah, definitely.
tries to bring harmony to everybody, and that was just kind of the simplest thing. Do you think she had any I think everybody could be diagnosed with something, just how
Something,
big
yeah.
the DSM is, but do you think she had
Yeah.
any mental issues or disorders?
Um, she was in a way almost like a hypochondriac where she thought she had everything at some point. Personally, I don't think she did. I think she may have had PTSD because she had a very traumatic childhood, but um she was, I know there's a word for it, but she was basically like one of those people who's an enabler to an arc because um you know he just kept sucking everything out of her, and I don't blame her in any way, but yeah, I just feel she thought very lowly of herself, so she kind of thought that she deserved what she was getting from him.
Yeah, it's sad just how
Yeah.
it all works, and it's just so cyclical. It just keeps happening over and over until somebody finally says enough's enough of this. I don't
Right.
want this for my kids or anything. Are you a parent or
I'm not.
no?
Mm-mm. I have three
Okay,
cats, but yeah.
three cats. What type do you think your dad was?
He took it too. So he's and we've talked about he's an INFJ.
INFJ. Wow.
Mhm.
Okay. What were his experiences? I don't know if you want to go that deep or whatever.
You
Or
mean just the way he was as a parent, or?
yeah, or like what happened to him?
Oh yeah, so he grew up in a he was first generation American. His dad was from India, his mom was from the Philippines.
Oh wow.
So they're culturally just kind of different, and he's very dark skinned. And he grew up in the 60s, so he experienced a lot of racism, a lot of like sort of he's kind of like a pariah in school, people mistreated him a lot, and his dad passed away when he was 14. And he was left in a household full of three younger sisters and his mom. And his mom had some kind of like vendetta against men. So she would pamper the daughters a lot and kind of treat him like shit.
No. Yeah. It's kind of something similar that I had because I was a step kid, I guess. But
Really.
yeah, that's really tough. Wow, you don't look part Indian and part Filipino.
Yeah. No, some people say it. Some people say that you can't see it at all.
No. How's that? Have you ever been like to another country to visit family with him, or has it all been in the US?
No, it's all pretty much been in the US.
Okay. So you said that you're a student of psychology. That's what I was going for. I
Mhm.
took a pause to kind of launch this. I think this is a little bit more important for school than me at this point.
Mhm.
Maybe I'll revisit it. What are you kind of studying? Are you getting your bachelor's or
Yeah, I'm getting my undergrad just in psychology, and then I'm hoping to look into getting a master's in social work so I could, see, diagnose, and treat people.
Is there like a direction you want to go? Like any certain disability, like disorders or any populations or?
I would probably want to focus on borderline, but also cluster B in general. A big hope of mine is to really start like moving more into also figuring out how to try to treat, NPD or ASPD, and even the one less talked about histrionic, just because it really seems the spotlight has been on BPD for so long now. And it's not to say we don't need more help there, because there definitely could be progress made there, but it just, right now the clinical diagnosis people are saying is impossible to treat is NPD or ASPD. And I don't believe that. I believe that there's got to be a solution for everybody.
Yeah, I think early intervention is a key. It's kind of a shame that they don't like diagnose you with these until you're 18. I mean, it's
Right.
almost too late for a lot of people.
I agree.
Yeah.
It would, because your personality is, really developing in those earlier years, and that'd be the best time to target it.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I just don't understand. Like they say your personality is still developing at 18, but I don't think there's much difference between an 18-year-old and like a 14-year-old, really.
Yeah.
At least mentally, maybe body wise, but so like yeah, we're talking about comorbidity and especially really prevalent in the same clusters like type A, type B, and type C. Do you think you show any traits of the others?
I can have episodes where I do feel somewhat avoidant. I had like 6 months where I just totally isolated in my apartment. I mean, I think part of that may have been due to the environment of COVID. Um, it probably encouraged that. But um, yeah, if I experience pretty strong abandonment or rejection, I'll go through periods of time where I don't talk to anybody, just for the fear of, judgment or anything like that.
So it's kind of similar to avoidant personality disorder in a lot of ways.
It can be at times. I mean, I think it's driven by the borderline, but it can kind of show up symptoms of other things. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of like comorbidity for me too. I can definitely show traits of the BPD. Not so much now, but I used to be very. I think it's just an INTJ thing with our SE inferior. We're really uh impatient, so I can just blow up at some little thing
Yeah.
and kind of just go off. And I have a hard time regulating my emotions as well because they weren't validated when I was a child as
Right.
well.
Imagine.
If there were any advantages to having borderline personality disorder, what would you say they are?
So, like, just because of the way I view psychology, I think that I would say there's no advantages to having it, because I think the point of a disorder is that whatever traits are used in your own diagnosis are distressful and causing harm, and that's what needs to be fixed. And anything that is an advantage, I would almost separate from the disorder and kind of just consider it more part of the personality. Because I know the way they diagnose disorders is whatever's causing distress or impairment. So if there was something that maybe looks like it's related to the borderline, I wouldn't consider it part of the disorder. I would just kind of say that that's part of their personality and they can keep that trait. It's not something that needs to be, addressed.
Yeah, I was just it kind of triggered some quotes here from Carl Jung that I
Hmm.
remembered. I just want to get it right. One was, "What was given to us by the past is adapted to the possibilities of the future." And another one is, "I'm not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become."
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think, yeah, maybe if there are advantages, it would be more so related to, right, like my past traumas and sort of like a different understanding of the world.
Yeah.
But as I said, like those advantages I wouldn't consider part of my personality disorder, more so just part of my personality, right? Because like if I didn't have any disordered traits, it would kind of be more like the advantages I had of a rough childhood without the disorder.
Yeah, I think I mean, I'd rather not have all this stuff that happened to me, but I don't think I would be in a situation where I want to bring awareness to it and want to
Yeah.
pursue my own goals in my own life and uh try to get out of like just work and try to do my own thing and have more independence too. So if I grew up in a more atypical nature, I wouldn't really come to the same realizations that
Yeah.
I did now.
And I would agree with that. I definitely one thing that I guess is a blessing in disguise is just having that rough past and being able to sort of explore that area of things, because it's definitely a different type of understanding that people that you'll have than most people who haven't been through that.
Yeah. If you could narrow it down to one thing, what would you say the worst thing about having BPD is?
Um, hmm. It's hard. I haven't thought about that. I think it I think it's really just the emotional reactivity, personally, because I think that everything I experience, I might have certain triggers, but even if I think everybody has, everybody on the planet has triggers, right? They have certain things that set them off, but it's the magnitude to what I feel them, and then also just the pre-wired like coping mechanisms, I think, are probably what make life so difficult and having it.
Yeah. I would imagine it'd be pretty rough to have. I think a lot of it just because, like you said, that with your past relationship, they don't feel like anything is wrong with them. And
Right.
it's just really, really hard to treat. Like they just don't have the hindsight to see, like, okay, the problem is coming from me. This is why I'm having so much chaos and things in my life. And it took me years and years of therapy and everything to kind of realize like how flawed my thinking was. I just used to think I was like this worthless person. So have you had any encounters with anybody with AvPD? I know it's probably kind of hard to find because they don't really socialize much.
um I did date a girl for a while that possibly had it. She's not diagnosed, but she showed some of those traits.
Yeah. What about INTJs? Have you met any INTJs?
My sister's an INTJ.
Oh, really?
Mhm.
How was your relationship with her?
It can be tough sometimes because I, am such an emotional person. And as I said, I don't show it to many people, but the people I'm close with, are the ones I turn to, and when I'm in crisis or when things are just getting really bad. Um, and I can tell she cares about me and loves me. Like she will stay on the phone with me and be there to comfort me. But at the same time, I almost feel, she tries to solve things very logically.
Hmm.
Whereas sometimes, I just need the emotional support or the emotional aspect. But she tries her best with me, and I know that she loves me. It's just we communicate a little differently sometimes.
Yeah, that's something I talk to INFPs a lot. Like I said, I really like INFPs, but I kind of scare them off. I think that's one of the biggest reasons because like we think like we have what's called FE trickster down in our shadow, and we don't really pick up on the emotions of others and realize that people need emotional validation. We kind of just think like, well, if we were to solve your problem, then you wouldn't feel these feelings. But I know, especially someone like INFPs, kind of need to process the feelings before they can really take action, right?
Right, definitely.
And I don't know if she'll appreciate this, so we can definitely not touch on this if you want. How did she turn out with your dad and your mom and that environment?
So yeah, all three of us, we went through a lot growing up. But my brother and sister are both pretty stable as far as any sort of clinical psychology diagnoses. I wouldn't say either of them. I mean, I think there might be some PTSD, but just in terms of where their standpoint is in life, they're both very successful and both happily married, and they both have healthy relationships. Um, they're both pretty well put together, I would say.
That's good.
Yeah.
I just want to dive a little bit into the functions. I don't know how far you've looked into them. How's having like FI as your hero function, your dominant function? I mean, you probably talked about that quite a bit already. About kind of you go deep down and you feel the emotions very deeply, and you don't really bring them out unless you're really close to someone, right?
Yeah, I would say so. That just kind of is more so my own emotions, I guess. But I do feel a lot of the times I can almost act as somebody's therapist, just because there's like this sort of nonverbal communication, I think, that people can feel, at least when they're opening up emotionally, and they can sort of feel that I'm feeling their emotion even without me communicating that much. Because a lot of times, really, people just want somebody to listen. They don't need you to try to solve their problem. And even just like kind of sitting there and nodding my head and, you know, just sort of like continuing the conversation to allow them to open up more. I think that's a lot of where I use my FI, would say.
Yeah, I think that's one reason why I really appreciate INFPs. It's something that we kind of stunt as INTJs or FI, and we can kind of look up to you to kind of learn from that a little bit better and kind of be more like putting yourself in their shoes basically and just
Mhm.
letting them vent, letting them come to their own conclusions really. What
Yeah.
about like you said that you noticed pretty early on that you had the NE within you and you could kind of see the patterns around you. How's that affected you?
Sometimes I think I do it a bit too much. And it can annoy people. Uh, just because, I I guess I might come off as like stubborn, but I'm not trying to. I'm trying to just have a philosophical conversation with things. Um, I'm trying to think of examples. I don't know. Like maybe like my friend will say something like, "Oh, like you want to take my car or your car?" And then I'll get into like, well, like what do you define as a car? Like does it have to have four wheels? Does it have three wheels? Can your car be anything that moves a person? Or like, and then like a lot of times people don't want to have that conversation. They just want to sort of, talk about like sports or something else. And those
Yeah.
conversations are actually pretty hard for me to have. But I find myself just like it's really easy and really like enjoyable for me to kind of just go and take deep dives into things.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely appreciate conversations like that too. And it's just hard to
Mhm.
find people who will just kind of go beyond the weather or sports, like you said, and it's
Yeah,
kind of frustrating.
I agree.
What about your SI? I know that's kind of a big thing that holds a lot of INFPs back. How's that affected you?
So you might have to explain that. That would be sort of just the introverted like sensory or like
Yeah, introverted
observing.
sensation. It's kind of about like your own personal comfort, kind of recalling from the past. I imagine, having BPD and kind of recalling your past memories for the solve present situations.
Okay.
Could be about like kind of like even like discipline or self control. People with high SI are usually pretty good about that. Keeping like honors and traditions and keeping things the way they
Okay.
were.
Yeah. I'm pretty I'm pretty bad with that, I would say. Yeah, and that might be my FI overpowering it because I just know I can logically tell myself like what the right thing to do is or what'll be better. But then I can emotionally convince myself to do something else.
Well, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, going forward, I know I want to have healthy, stable romantic relationships, but even in my past relationship, I realized very quickly this is not healthy. And it's not good for either of us to be in this. And I could logically say that, but just internally, emotionally, like my fear of abandonment kicks in, and
Hmm.
and like I want to try to end it, but then I'm like, well, no, like then I'm gonna be alone, I'm gonna lose them. So just kind of a bit of that, I guess.
So you kind of stay in that situation, like your own comfort zone, basically, because you don't want to, be single, have to start over another relationship.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. SI is really, really far down for me, so it's kind of like one of the things I don't understand too that well. So thank you for reiterating there.
Mhm.
What about your TE? Your TE inferior?
Is that thinking like extrovertedly?
Yeah, extroverted thinking. It's kind of like you're going to school and you're want to be a social worker, so that's a good way to exercise that. It's something that INFPs often feel really insecure about, like feeling not smart enough or not capable enough to stand up
Um,
academically or intellectually.
so I wonder how that's different than the NE because at least in terms of like school or more, I guess, academic topics, like that's actually, one of the few things I feel very secure and confident about in myself. What I feel more unconfident about is just my ability to like, I would say regulate my emotions or being able to talk to most people. Just because I guess the topics I usually want to talk about, I feel I can't connect to most people with.
Yeah, yeah. So I just want to go a little bit in the shadow. So nemesis, opposing personality. It's kind of like these cognitive attitudes that John Beebe discussed. Kind of not well known as like MBTI is, but FE is kind of like INFPs are often accused of being kind of narcissistic or self-righteous, and they believe like
Mhm.
their own personal morals and values are more important than other people, and they think that other people's own personal morals are bad and they feel higher than them. Is that something that you kind of struggle with at all?
It's interesting because I think it is, but it's also like I guess ironic because like I consider myself probably like a nihilist. It's not to say that like I'm gonna go and kill somebody because I think murder's okay. Um, but my view is that like everybody has their own subjective morals and none are like better than the other. But at the same time, I would say I'm narcissistic in the sense that like I think nihilism's true, and if somebody else wants to tell me morality is objective, like I just, I kind of write that off. But in terms of like subjective morals, I don't think any single person's reality is more right than anybody else's.
Okay. And what about NI nemesis? Like you're very critical of what you want. It sounds like you're very kind of goal oriented, and you know what you want really, but you kind of see other people being irresponsible with what they want, and you don't really want things. You kind of keep yourself from wanting things, but that doesn't seem to be the case here.
No, I think to a certain degree. I mean, so I am like now pursuing my degree again, but I actually took this whole semester off because the person I was dating wanted to move to Florida, and I said, "Okay, I'll move with you. I'll just drop out of school and we'll do it." So I can be, and that might be my BPD actually, but I can be very impulsive and suggestible to other people and really let it affect and change my life.
Kind of with that any giving other people what they want and kind of seeing their possibilities and things like that and going along
Yeah,
with it.
yeah,
And the trickster function is something that you kind of lack awareness of. Like I was talking about the FE trickster for INTJs. For INFPs, it's SE trickster, kind of really accident prone, not
yeah,
really aware of what's going on.
yeah,
And
definitely.
yeah,
Always breaking shit.
yeah, that's something that happens to you a lot.
Oh yeah, definitely. Not a very good driver either, I have to admit.
Yeah, a lot of INPs aren't like INTPs, INFPs are very, I guess, in the clouds and just not thinking about what's here,
Definitely.
right here in the
I lose
moment.
track of the world a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And the last one is the demon function, which I have SI demon, which I talked about, which I didn't understand because I don't really like traditions and social norms and what other
Mhm.
people are doing and what happened in the past. Yours is TI. It's kind of like you don't really care about your own thoughts. You don't care about your own opinions, really, like your own original thoughts. Is that something that comes up?
Um, it's interesting because I would say like I don't care much for external traditions either, I would say.
Mhm.
Just just in a sense that you know, I don't know, I just don't view the world like very structurally. Like everything is very abstract to me. And anything that is in place in the world is a social construct in a sense, right? Like everything that we see and think, it's a social construct. And I guess maybe because I think that way, I'm not like able to create original thoughts, maybe in a sense of like saying this is that way and that's the way it is. Because I think anything can be argued and anything could technically be possible.
Okay. Right. Just my closing questions. I ask this about everybody. Well, the first question I usually ask is, do you have a favorite type?
I do really love other INFPs. That might be anytime I encounter one, it's it's either not a great conversation because we're both like too quiet or scared to open up. But if we're able to break that threshold, I really love talking to other INFPs. I also like ENFPs a lot too. I think they're kind of like I feel like the confident version of us.
A lot more camaraderie and stuff going on.
Yeah.
How is it being like? a male and so emotional? I know a lot of INFP males struggle with that.
It's pretty hard, I think, especially with dating, just because I think a lot of women might be more drawn towards men that appear more stable, I guess, and you know, I don't know, more stoic almost, just because it creates like the sense of stability. And being someone who is emotional and then also has BPD, so I'm just very erratic and almost looking for somebody to be able to calm me down and help me. I think that is pretty off-putting, at least for me with like when it comes to dating.
What about in just like general life, like having male friends and trying to bond with males? I know it's something that's almost dying out. A lot of like men don't really associate with men just because of like feminism, right? Basically, it's saying like there's no place for men in this world anymore. We don't need masculinity. We can do it all. So I think a lot of men get the impression, like, especially growing up, not to really follow and get these relationships with other guys. Is that something that you struggled with, or is that something like they look at you like, wow, you're just so emotional, you need to man up, or anything like that?
I mean, I have experienced a little bit of that sort of the, like a gender essentialism where like you need to act a certain way, right? Like you be a man or whatever. And especially, just I think in bigger crowds that happens. But I always have been able to find sort of like niche friends that are kind of on the outskirts. And I would say like all of the friends I have, one of them is an INTP and I have an ENTP friend. Even though they might be that way, they are emotionally understanding, even if they don't function that way. So I've been able to find people, but it's definitely more so I will either have very close relationships with people.
You answered the favorite type, other NFPs. What's your least favorite type, you would say, if you have one?
I really struggle to get along with most people that are ST, any type. But if there was one, it's like any S types. I just in general, it's really hard for me to communicate, have conversations with them.
And it's a shame because they're the vast majority of people out there.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. If you'd like any other people, any other types, you know, mm, neurotypical people, whatever you want to call it, non BPD people to understand about you or borderline personality disorder or INFPs, what would it be?
Um, just with I know like INFPs, I think a lot of us often just feel very misunderstood. Um, when trying to reframe things and view them a different way than what everybody else is saying. And I think a lot of people take it as a personal attack that that's how we feel. But a lot of the times we just want to try to take the other view and have a discussion and play devil's advocate. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we feel that way or that we are trying to invalidate the other person. We just like to try to reframe things a lot. And I think it's something we're often misunderstood for.
Okay. And what about, I know, like you said that, I think I found you on Reddit. You were talking
Mm,
about, well, you're talking about making a YouTube channel of your own, which I definitely encourage you to do. Are you trying to
mhm.
spread awareness of like borderline personality disorder and get rid of the stigma of that and try to lessen that? I know a lot of people think like, oh yeah, borderline personality disorder, you're crazy, or
Right.
you're harmful, you're toxic.
Yeah, I mean, maybe one of the videos, but in general, I kind of wanted to just explore and discuss different psychology topics.
Okay.
In general, yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't know if wasn't clear in your agenda there. Okay. And what would you like to know about INTJs or other types or anything else that you're maybe been curious about, like you didn't know about your sister and maybe she didn't quite grasp?
I guess how has that affected your relationships? Just not even just romantic, but just like people in general. Being an INTJ.
Might be a hard question for me to answer since I'm an INTJ and have AVPD, but
Yeah.
I think INTJs just in general have a hard time. Of course, that's the stereotype, but I think the reason really is because of FE trickster, where we just don't really pick up on the emotions of others. Like we try to rationalize it, like we discussed, and we try to solve people's solutions rather than hear them out. I think that's very off-putting of people. We also have what's any opposing personality, where we're very paranoid of people and what they want and their intentions, and we constantly think we're gonna get stabbed in the back, so we'll just, like,
Mm.
any signs of betrayal, it could be totally imagined. It's kinda like BPD, that's like a very linear, symptom, I think, of being INTJ and even BPD. Like, you just like, "Oh, I'm gonna break things off with them before they hurt me," and,
Yeah.
they do it to me. I think that's very off-putting with people, and like the SI, like, I don't care about going to church, I don't care about
Same.
football games on
Yeah.
Sunday and things like that, and that's just like we kinda isolate ourselves and we're very independent, so,
Mm.
like, I personally, I still struggle with relationships. I really don't have too many personal friends or anything like that, and I'm definitely a different person out in society. I'm definitely a different person, much more quiet, and, I can't just walk up to strangers and talk about stuff like this. They're gonna look at me like I'm crazy.
Right.
Eh,
Do you do you find that like comforting to you though? Are you like content being in the state you're in, or would you? I mean, are you like working to change it? You'd like to change it,
well, I am definitely working to kind of get out there and be with people and try to establish relationships, I would say. Like, there's a big misconception at INTJs don't need relationships, that we kinda like what schizoid personality disorder is.
Mhm.
I kind of feel I'm in the middle of developing, because a lot of people with AVPD go a schizoid personality disorder, and that's pretty much where you don't have relationships and you don't want anything to do with
Right?
people.
Uh-huh.
I'm kind of between, like, I'm developing that and I'm really wanting to avoid that, and it's like something internal that's kind of ripping me apart. But, we do need relationships, like I said. We just need, we could probably count them on one hand and we're good with that.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, I'm definitely trying to, and I see like all the faults of me and how I sabotage myself over the years. So I would say
Did
so.
did you like in the past? I guess though, were your relationships with other people were they? What was like the dynamic there?
I think most of the types I was in relationships with, like friends, and even like my ex-wife was ESTP,
Mm.
was ESTPs. I think I've always just been able to handle their directness and their bluntness.
Mhm.
They kind of like, criticize people, and that's kind of just
Yeah.
what they're designed to do. And the majority of ESTPs are just unhealthy because I think they're the least likely to want to grow, really.
Mm.
But I never had the best, most fulfilling relationships. I think, like if there was somebody who was healthy mentally and they would just kind of interact with me and they would see like, just so dark and depressed, and my mindset just really, it was really about me, like just how bad I felt about myself.
Mhm.
That
I
kind of,
sorry. Go ahead.
oh, I'm done.
Oh no, I was saying I very very much relate to that, and I think a big misconception with people is sort of, and I find this on the BPD subreddit where, right, I was kind of saying I think some people with BPD think everybody else is wrong, and then other people with BPD think they're always wrong, and I think it's two sides of the same coin because they both stem from self hatred and also thinking you're always wrong and you're a piece of shit. I don't think is really that much better, because you're not going to make any progress, and if you do think you're a piece of shit, then like you might start to become one in your own view. And really the root of it is just really having an awareness of when you're wrong but also when you're right. It can't always be one way, black or white.
Yeah, one thing I really noticed, I think people with BPD and AVPD are just kind of drawn to each other because it's just like a yin and yang, but a yin and yang that's on fire, basically.
Mm.
And they kind of like have somebody who would just take it. Like people with AVPD are just so lonely, they just want somebody with a relationship. But it's kind of the same with BPD because they're
Right.
just kind of reckless and
Yeah.
off kilter, and people just have a hard time dealing with that. So they kind of just get together and form that. I think all my romantic relationships that lasted any length of time, I was with people with BPD, and it's just, very chaotic and explosive.
Right, especially if it's not under control and not managed at all. I don't know, were they aware of their own diagnosis and seeking treatment or
No, I encouraged them to do so, but, like the current, the typical BPD thing was, "It's not me, it's you."
Mhm.
and you're kind
Yeah.
of the victim. But I mean, sadly, people with BPD were victims at one time, and I think people need to realize that and be
Yeah.
considerate and patient with them and try to work with them. But you need to set boundaries for yourself because they will definitely take advantage of that. A lot of them.
Yeah, I wonder if it has to do with the scale of narcissistic traits because as I was saying, I noticed this with BPD that I see people who are either it's always everyone else's fault or they're constantly just thinking it's their fault. And I don't know if sort of thinking it's everybody else's fault is almost evolving from that sort of internal hatred, and building like a shell so they don't have to feel that constant shame. Um, and maybe that's just another step. If somebody has that, it's another step you have to first take to build that awareness, and then you can sort of attack the disorder.
Yeah, I think like with my ex-wife in general and somebody else I was in a relationship with, I think I eventually left because it just got crippling. It was like almost it was
Yeah.
ruining my life, and they kind of came to realization like, wow, I was a big part of the problem. Not that I was perfect in the relationships or anything
Mhm.
like that, but I think life has to slap you in the face hard enough a few times before you can really get to it. And I think a lot of people just don't have that insight.
I agree. I didn't really seek full treatment for my BPD until I lost someone I was in a relationship for a while that I took very seriously and sort of had to have that awareness of like, all right, like what did I do wrong here? Because my life is not going great and I just want to fix it. I want it to be better, and sometimes it means realizing that you were in the wrong or you've done things wrong.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's perfect for sure. And
Yeah.
have you ever come across somebody with full blown NPD? You think?
I I think my dad meets all the criteria.
Really?
Just his level of grandiosity. We'll walk into a restaurant and he thinks everybody's looking at him because he's so attractive, or he says things like that. And just no matter what he does, he's always right somehow. He's always justified. So I think he might have the full blown disorder.
Yeah, it's just tough to getting people like that getting through to them.
It is. Yeah.
I forgot the guy's name, but he's one of the guys that helped invent the nuclear weapon, and he was like narcissistic.
Oppenheimer or
Yes, yes, yes. And he
yeah,
just kind of came to this realization, like, wow, I've just been a horrible person. I need to change. And he really regretted being a part of that.
yeah.
Yeah,
I would imagine I would feel a lot of guilt if I had helped develop that thing.
yeah. Even like Einstein did it. I was kind of like he was
Yeah.
involved in that.
Yeah, he was.
All right. Well, I really appreciate you doing this. Do you have any
Yeah.
questions or comments or anything you'd like to tell the people about yourself or anything before we go?
Don't think so. I appreciate you reaching out to me. It's always nice to have conversations like this, and I hope to see your video on there soon. Excited to watch it.
Yeah, I'll get it out and I'll let you know when it's out. Please, if you like this content, like, share, subscribe. I really want to bring awareness to it. Like he said, he wants to study the other cluster B personality disorders because BPD is probably the most widely studied of all the personality disorders, and AvPD is the least studied, probably because well, people don't want to come out and get help and seek treatment is a big reason. So if you do have AvPD or BPD, feel free to message me in Discord. I have a Discord server. Email down here below in the comments. Feel free to message me and seek help if you need help. Don't be ashamed. There's no shame in it. All right.
Awesome.
Well,
Well, thank you.
yep, I appreciate you taking the time to do this and opening up. I know it's probably not the easiest thing to do. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for going on the clickbait. Have a great day.